Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Ann Reardon and today we're making a 100 layer crepe cake with those crepes layered up with raspberry sauce, ganache and mascarpone in between the layers. We've had so many requests for something 100 layers and also for something that doesn't need an oven. So I've combined those two requests to make you this huge cake. Firstly, to make the crepes you'll need eggs, flour, milk, sugar, vanilla and melted butter. Now this will make about 25 crepes, so we're going to need to do all of these ingredients 4 times over for the 100 layers. Place everything into the blender and I'll put all of the recipe quantities on the howtocookthat.net website for you in grams and ounces and cups, and I'll link to that below. Blend that together. Now you can do this by hand using a whisk in a bowl if you don't have a blender. Heat a non-stick fry pan and then pour in a small amount of the mixture and immediately tilt your pan from side to side to spread it out evenly over the base. Leave that on that side for just under a minute and then flip it over to the other side and let that cook for about 30 seconds more and then just tip it out of your pan. Now the other way you can make sure that they are very thin crepes is to pour a larger amount of batter into the pan and then immediately tip the excess out. Now this will give you some up the edge of your pan, so you'll need to use your spatula to cut across to make it a nice round circle, and that just makes the crepe really thin and really even the whole way across. And then you just need to make more and more and more, counting as you go. Now, if you're wanting to do 100 layers, then you're going to have to keep going. Perhaps if you could actually count these for me to make sure and just double check that I actually have 100 crepes, that would be great. Now, of course, when you're making it, you can do less. You can do 20, you can do 25, you can use a smaller pan so that you don't need as much batter. It's up to you. Now, to make our raspberry sauce, we need lemon, sugar, and frozen raspberries, or you could use fresh raspberries here. Juice your lemons and then add that into the pan with the raspberries. Then heat that on high heat until the fruit falls apart. Pour it into a fine sieve and then use the back of your spoon to push the juice through and into the bowl. Add sugar to taste. I'm not going to add much here, I just want it to be quite tart because we've got the sweet ganache. And then microwave it to heat it up so the sugar dissolves so you don't have any of those crystals in there. Now for the ganache, you'll need milk chocolate and cream. Just pour the cream over your chocolate and then heat that in the microwave in 30-second intervals, stirring well each time until all the chocolate is melted and you've got a nice smooth ganache. And now we're ready with our crepes, mascarpone cheese, ganache and raspberry sauce. Now because this is going to be so tall, I'm stacking it in a stock pot to keep the sides straight. Place your first crepe at the bottom, and if it's too big on the edges there, you can pull it out and just trim it by placing a baking tin on top and running your knife around the edge so you get a good circle there. Put that back in the bottom and then add a tablespoon of ganache on top and spread it out using a spatula. Add the next crepe and then cover that in raspberry sauce, spreading it out. Then another crepe and a thin layer of mascarpone. Now this is going to take me a while to layer up 100 layers of this. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to get Dave to read you chapter 1 from our book, The Deep Enders.
All right, here we go. Chapter 1, The Deep Enders. Mickey stepped onto the murky street, skirting the opium dens and tin roof gambling shanties that pockmarked the desperate side of town. A sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds, backlighting a squadron of angry mosquitoes in the alley ahead. Mickey swatted them away, walking fast with her head low in the midnight air. Her chest ached and eyes burned, but she couldn't stop now, not here. An argument drifted on the breeze, and in the distance a miserable dog howled. Keep moving, don't draw attention. And then she saw them. 2 soldiers slouched under a fly-spotted porch light, smoking as they swapped tall tales. Mickey balked, but they hadn't seen her yet. She couldn't turn back now anyway. Hugging the shadows, she slipped into a side street and immediately picked up the pace. Mickey checked over his shoulder, then weaved into another narrow alley. A heartbeat later, crashing into the candle-lit card table with 3 gamblers hunched over it. Sorry. Mickey stepped back, her arms raised in apology as the men scrambled to steady the table. One of them, young with scraggly blonde hair, glared up at her. But then his eyes widened greedily as he took in the pretty teenager, dark hair and olive skin with a tiny beauty mark on her cheek. The gambler flashed a broken smile as Mickey edged away from the trio. "Hello, lovely girl." He beckoned her closer, waving his beer bottle. "Come have a drink." "No thanks," she said firmly, easing past, almost in the clear. The man suddenly lunged for her and latched onto the hem of her cotton shirt. Mickey pulled away, but he was too strong, reeling her in until she could smell the stink on his breath. She tried to wrench his hand off, and in a moment of morbid fascination, her eyes fell on the gnarled stump where his little finger should have been. Mickey wanted to cry out, but the soldiers, they were so close, just around the corner. If they heard anything... "Let go," she rasped. "Let go," he mimicked sadistically, and the others roared with laughter. Mickey balled a fist and struck with all the might on his shoulder. It wasn't hard as far as punches go, just enough to throw him off balance. But as he swayed backward, his rickety stool creaked and toppled over. His feet shot straight into the air and upended the table, spraying cards and beer bottles across the night sky. The other two men leapt up indignantly, cursing as their beer rained down. And for one stunned moment, Mickey was transfixed by the chaos she had caused. "You all right, Toothy?" one of the strangers said, stretching out a hand to his nine-fingered friend sprawled in the dirt. The other man, an older fellow with a beer gut and a wispy moustache, eyed the girl with growing suspicion, and slowly a sly smile crept across his sunburnt mug. "She's one of them," he thrust a finger in her face. "Busted." Mickey didn't protest. She turned and sprinted down the alley as three men clambered over the table and gave chase, yelping like hunting dogs after a rabbit. Stupid. It was madness for her to have come back. To be here in this place alone at night could only ever have ended badly. But she was scared and starving, and all she wanted to do was go home. Even if home was empty, even if the soldiers had already taken everyone, it was the only place that she knew. She ran harder, deeper into the labyrinth. Mickey had been a good athlete at school, but the hunters were grown men, and despite their intoxicated state, they were gaining on her. Toothy, in particular, was quick and motivated. He'd recovered from his humiliating tumble in a flash and joined the chase, racing past the other two men like they were jogging on a beach. Step by step, he closed in on his prey. His footsteps pounded in Mickey's ears as she blurred past a side street and Chinese laundromat with buckets and bamboo handled mops hanging on an awning to dry. "Faster, he's right behind you," her mind screamed. Ahead, the street widened to an expanse of flat ground, and beyond that, the waters of Dampier Creek, smooth and glinting in the moonlight. Mickey desperately wanted to keep running. But with the blonde one right on her tail, she realised the open space was her worst enemy. She'd be run down in a matter of seconds. Instead, Mickey did the last thing he expected. Digging her heel into the dirt, she turned and sprinted directly towards Toothy. Then at the last second, she double-stepped around his grasping fingers and headed for the laundromat. Her boots pounded on the road. It was close now, but so too were the shadowy figures of the other two coming her way. In a few seconds, she would be hopelessly trapped between all three men. If she could just reach it, almost there, she leapt for the bamboo mop hanging from the awning. The beam overhead groaned, then the head of the mop broke away, and she swung down, landing neatly in the dirt with a wooden handle in her hands. Toothy snarled almost upon her as Mickey wheeled around. In that moment, she was grateful for her father's playful kendo lessons as a child, mock stick fighting in the backyard with homemade face masks and bamboo swords. She planted her feet, gripped the stick with both hands, and swung viciously in the direction of her pursuer. The bamboo flashed in the night and struck Toothy on the forehead, his wild hair flying as he cried out and staggered into a corrugated fence along the laundromat. A clang reverberated down the alley. The hunter bled, but didn't fall, and even in the dim light, she saw the glint in his eyes shift to something darker. Mickey tucked the mop handle under her arm and bolted, turning right, down a side street, then another, and she might have escaped, except her ankle clipped the cargo box and she tumbled onto the ground in anguish, the bamboo skittering across the dirt as she fell. The girl scrambled to her feet. Before she could reach the stick, a strong hand suddenly clapped tight over her mouth. Eyes wide with terror, she tried to scream to fight him off, but it was no use. Feet scrabbling in the dirt, Mickey clawed and bit and thrashed as she was hauled mercilessly into the darkest corner of the alleyway. Then nothing. One hand firm over her mouth while the other squeezed tight around her torso, locking Mickey's wrists to her side. She could see the bamboo on the ground, but it was too far away. Again, she tried to wriggle free, but then her heart turned to ice at the sound of approaching footsteps and laboured breathing. A moment later, the enraged Toothy thundered past, blood streaming from the gash on his head. The other men followed close behind and also disappeared around the corner. Mickey waited a few seconds and then bucked again, trying to swivel to face her assailant, but those arms held tight. Enough! She lifted a heel and slammed it onto her captor's toes. With a cry, the vice-like grip loosened and she scurried from his clutches, scooping up the bamboo stick in one hand. She clattered against the tin fence on the far side of the alley, then spun to face her attacker, head on, bracing defensively with her teeth clenched and weapon raised. "Oi!" a pained voice hissed from the shadows. "Take it easy, dum bum." And Mickey's breath was gone. It can't be. She stared at the figure shrouded in darkness, desperate to peel away the veil of night and see his face, to know for sure. "You can't ever go home, Mickey." He stepped into the moonlight. "We're on our own." And that's the end of chapter 1. How you going over there, Ann?
Nearly there, thanks, hun. I found a quicker way of layering it. If I leave the crepe flat and then spread the topping onto it, then pick it up and flip it over and add it to the stack. And then I've just been getting rid of air bubbles as I went by pushing down with a cake tin. Probably about every 10 layers, you just need to push it down to get rid of all those air bubbles. Now this top one actually becomes the base when we tip it out. So if it's not quite flat on the edges, just add a little more ganache and spread it out to make it even. And then you want to cover that in plastic wrap and place it in the fridge overnight. The next day, place a cake stand on top and flip it over and then pull the tin off carefully. Now, if you line the tin with baking paper, this process will be much easier. I found there was a bit of a vacuum down one side, so I had to put a knife down one edge just to let some air into the bottom. Now you can leave this like that, or if you want to make it look prettier, you can cover the whole thing in ganache or in buttercream. I'm using the top of a piping tip just to make stripes down the edges and roughen them up a bit to make it look a bit like tree bark. Then on top, use a skewer to draw rings like trees have in the middle, or you could pipe that on with white chocolate to give a bit of a pattern so it looks like a tree stump. Now for the big moment, cutting into the 100 layers. I'm not sure if this will even be able to stand up because it is so tall. Let's see how we go. Oh my goodness, look at all those layers. It's very pretty and very dainty looking. It actually turned out better than I thought it would. That looks pretty cool. Now for the taste test. That's pretty good. I can't say it's my favourite cake in the world. I like the flavour, but I think I want more filling. So if I was making it again, I'd do 50 layers instead of 100, but use the same amount of ganache and raspberry sauce and mascarpone so you get more filling on each crepe. Having said that though, 2 of my boys really like it just as it is, so it depends how much of a sweet tooth you are. If you want more filling or if you want more crepe, you'll have to decide that for yourself. Subscribe to How to Cook That for more crazy sweet creations. Click here for more cake videos, here for the recipe, and here for last week's chocolate camera. Put all your requests in the comments below. Make it a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.
Yes.